Hello and welcome to Insurance Agents Talk Shop. I'm your host, Doug Coombs, Chief Marketing Officer at SIAA. Today's episode is Leveraging Tech to Elevate Agency Sales and Service. I'd like to introduce my guest today, Torey Maerz, co-founder and CEO of ClientCircle by Rocket Referrals. And I'll let you know that Torey brings over 11 years of experience with ClientCircle to our discussion today. ClientCircle is a leading communications platform helping insurance agencies enhance client service and sales and increase sales. And in the interest of full disclosure, I just want to let folks know that ClientCircle is a technology partner of SIAA and a number of its member agencies. And I also want to let folks know that Torey has participated as a breakout session host in SIAA's premier virtual conference, IA Evolve. Torey, welcome and thank you for joining today.
Hey, thank you for having me. Super excited to chat, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So we're going to have a good time today talking about some neat stuff.
All right. Sounds good. And I'm glad to hear that excitement level rising. So, but before we get into the discussion, do you mind taking a moment explaining a little bit about the relationship between ClientCircle and Rocket Referrals, as I believe most of our listeners do recognize both companies individually, but not necessarily the connection between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rocket Referrals is essentially, I guess you could say now it's our legal name. When we created the company 10 years ago, we named ourselves Rocket Referrals because that is what we focused on 100%, was helping an insurance agent increase their referrals and word of mouth. And over time, as you do that, you also start to build on all of these other ancillary services. It could be Google reviews or, text messaging and handwritten cards and more automations and things like that. And what we realized is over time, we just outgrew that name, Rocket Referrals. We were doing so much more. And really our focus has been around the entire client experience. And we believe that everything is full circle with the client. In fact, if you have a client and you lose that client, you can win them back, right? And so we think that it goes from the time someone comes to your website to when they contact you to help you, close that business, get them to refer their friends and family, and then close that business. And then if you need to, win them back later. And so that's why we came up with the name ClientCircle, because to us, everything is sort of full circle with the client experience.
Sure. That's literally what you're talking about then. You're calling it what it is, right? That circle, with the client, that whole, the journey, if you will. So
the client journey, exactly.
Excellent. Very good. So I appreciate you clarifying that for us. And I'd like to now kind of start off with the basics if we could. And I realize that ClientCircle offers insurance agencies services such as CRM or customer relationship management, as well as client feedback through Net Promoter Scores, or often referred to as NPS. Can you define both of those for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So NPS, I'll start with, because that's where we started. With Rocket Referrals, we learned that NPS is a core functionality to really be able to understand how customers think about you. And also, it's a great index score to see how you compare with other agencies. And so because we've been doing NPS for over 10 years now, we have a bunch of benchmark information to be able to say, with NPS, we can tell you with a very high degree of certainty how much of your business is likely to refer you, how much you're going to retain over time, how much you're at risk of losing even in a short period of time. And it's a very simple question that you ask your customers. It's how likely you are to recommend. And the way that we go about that, though, is kind of the key piece of who you're surveying when, and then what you do with those people to kind of follow up. Now, a CRM, I would say, is sort of the next level on top of that. It is taking NPS data and other types of communication to really, understand the full client relationship and experience, and making sure that you're communicating with those people in an automated way to, really be able to, quote, manage that customer relationship. I think that the term CRM has to be honest, a lot of different meanings, probably to a lot of different listeners to this, podcast. You ask 5 people, 10 people, you're going to get 5 or 10 different answers, and so what we like to do is ask people, what are the business problems that they have right now? How can we help solve those things? And not necessarily say it's this feature or that feature, but we put together a strategic plan on how we can help them achieve those goals using technology. And that's kind of the key thing I think that's important, whether it's CRM or NPS, is that you're really thinking about the business problems that you have.
Sure. And that is totally logical. And I want to kind of dig into both of those for a moment, if we could. So when it comes to the Net Promoter Score or NPS, at what points, if somebody has engaged ClientCircle as their vendor, if you will, at what points is that survey, the NPS survey, happening?
Yeah. So, one of the things with NPS that we realized very early on is how important it is to survey your customers on a regular basis. So as soon as you start with us, we're going to sort of pick out a cohort, you might call it, or a group of customers that we're going to survey on a regular basis. And then we break your business up into lots of these tiny little groups, and then we're going to survey them sort of on I think probably you could almost say it's almost every 6 months a group is going to be surveyed, but then we break it up into lots of different groups, so you're always getting sort of this consistent feed of information. And you might wonder, why do we need that consistent feed? Well, as you're communicating with people and as you're making changes, as you're making improvements, you want to see, are we moving the needle? Are we actually making a difference? Are we truly getting people to refer more? Are we getting people to like us more? Or maybe you make a mistake and you want to be able to fix that mistake quickly. So some of our customers, and actually I don't see this so much anymore, but in the past, we would have agents come to us and say, I only want to survey people once a year or once every 2 years. And I think they had this feeling that they didn't want to poke the bear, right? Like if I communicate with my customers, they might cancel. And, we have done we've worked really hard to sort of change that mindset. And in fact, we can prove that the more often you communicate with people, the more likely they are to stay with you.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean,
I have to tell you, I'm kind of laughing a little bit at the thought that that I guess it's very human to think that, well, if I don't ask the question, then I won't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, but it occurred to me.
And so then, kind of moving on to the CRM, piece of it. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. And, the CRM piece is more of what you do with that NPS information, right? So once you are querying your customers on a regular basis, you're learning a lot about them. You're learning, if you have a detractor, how do you retain that business? How do we?
Torey, I'm gonna interrupt you for 1 second because you've made me think of something else, because you're talking about this process. Maybe every 6 months we're querying certain groups, cohorts of customers. How much do I, as the agent, what do I have to do in order to make this happen? Or is this a set it and forget it? It's going to happen for me, and I'm going to get the data and the analytics, and I'm going to be able to understand what's going on?
Great question, because one of the things that we believe is the least amount of work that we can put on the agent's plate, the better everything's going to be. And it's because agents are super busy. They have a lot of things going on. And so we take a lot of that stuff on. And sometimes it's kind of hard for people to kind of grasp this idea that we can do so much with data. But we can really get a lot of information about your customers and know who to survey and when to survey, so you don't have to think about that stuff, right? The only thing that the agent really needs to do is respond to the things when they come in. And it's one of those things where you kind of can get out of it what you put into it. So if, for example, I say, hey, I've found 5 detractors, and then you don't do anything with it, you're going to have a hard time retaining those, customers. But if you give those 5 people a call, your chances of retaining that business go up by several 100%. It's nuts how much of a difference that makes. And to be honest, you don't even need to solve problems. Sometimes all you need to do is pick up the phone and talk to people, and they'll appreciate it. So I guess the short answer of that is, if you can at least respond to people, that's really all that it takes.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And you're singing, the tune that I like to sing, and that is that communication. To your point, you don't even have to be solving a problem. People just want to know that, you've thought of them, right? So
right.
Yeah. But now you're doing it armed with data, and maybe being able to go into a part of the conversation, or steer the conversation in such a way that you address those concerns.
Right. Exactly.
Gotcha.
And, I should say, one of the most important things for people when you are going to run any type of NPS program is make sure you run it in a way that you can respond to the feedback. So if, for example, you're a smaller agency and maybe there's only 1 or 2 people, or 5 people even,
right,
don't send out 5,000 NPS surveys in a week, because you're not going to be able to respond to those things in any meaningful way.
Right.
So kind of think about how many responses you might get. And I should say we see about a 40% response rate on NPS. So imagine you're going to get 40%, responses back from what you send out. We kind of use that number to help set up those small cohorts that I was talking about before, to make sure that we're only sending a certain number of surveys every week.
Right. And that makes sense. You measure, or you attack I shouldn't say attack, but you engage based on what you are actually able to handle in terms of responsiveness. So
yeah, exactly.
I want to tackle one more component, if I may, off the top of my head here, for Net Promoter Score, because I'm sure there are going to be 1 or 2 listeners who are classical Net Promoter Score, the approach, because there's a little bit of a science to it, but it's been altered in terms of how, at times, by different entities, about how the Net Promoter Score is actually conducted and measured, et cetera. For example, and I don't mean to get too technical, but it just as a way to sort of state it, I suppose, in terms of how ClientCircle handles it, is that like the classic NPS scale would be 0 to 10. Mm-hmm. And then there would be a certain percentage, there is a certain percentage that would refer you versus a certain percentage who would not refer you, plus a certain percentage that would be neutral, if you will.
Right.
And you, frankly, if they're neutral, that means they won't refer you, so they actually count against you when you tally your Net Promoter Score. Does ClientCircle and its system, is it using that kind of a scale, like a 0 to 10, or are they using a 1 to 10 or a 0 to 5, or how? Yeah, what's your?
Thank you for asking, because we are sort of NPS traditionalists, I should say. Yeah. And really what I mean by that is we license NPS and run the program as it was intended, and as Bain, would really like it to be run. So that is and the reason we do that is for good benchmarking and measurements across, the industry. When you start to sort of change it up a little bit, you can't necessarily scientifically compare apples to apples, right? So
Right.
The one thing that we do a little bit differently is there is this concept of transactional NPS and more relationship NPS, and we focus heavily on the relationship NPS. And the thing is, from a transactional NPS standpoint, your hardcore NPS people are going to say, hey, you should send out an NPS survey anytime there's a transaction with a customer and shortly after that transaction.
Yep.
And I totally agree with that. The thing is, when you're in insurance, there's very few transactions. And sometimes when there's a transaction, it's around a claim and things like that. And I do think it makes sense to get some type of sentiment around the claims experience. But that is not necessarily representative of your agent's relationship with the insured. And during the claims experience, insureds kind of get confused a little bit between what my agent's doing for me and what my insurance company is doing for me.
So, very true. Yes.
And so we're trying to separate those things by adding in relational NPS that happens sort of, before a claim ever happens, and more related around, when a new customer, for example, comes onto an agency, there's a new customer NPS that we send. And we think of the transaction at that point as working with the agent and going through the quote process and finding the right coverage and things like that. And so that's what we're surveying. And then if you've been a customer for quite some time, it's more around renewals and things like that. So
Right.
Yeah.
And that makes some sense. I follow the logic there as well. What I'm wondering is there something in the CRM system that if somebody were to use the NPS and say that they would not refer us, right? So the score goes down or it's just poor. Is there something that would be very obvious to me by looking through the CRM that says, oh, and by the way, they had a claim last month, and the week before they took the survey, something that would alert me to, okay, something didn't go well with the company. I need to kind of follow up on this.
Yeah. So one of the neat things we have is, so actually I'll use Hawksoft as an example, because we have a really neat sort of thing called Sidecar that works with Hawksoft. And we have very similar, things with other management systems out there. I'm just using this as a concrete example to kind of give people a vision of what we can do. So imagine you get an NPS score, and then you bring up that person in your Hawksoft system. We have something called Sidecar that runs right next to Hawksoft, and then it's going to bring up all the extra information in ClientCircle at the same time, so you can get a really comprehensive view of everything that's going on with the policies in your management system, but then also any other communications and NPS scores and relationship type of stuff that's in ClientCircle. And so bringing those things sort of into the same view on the same screen really helps you better service the customer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So and I think that's critical for people to understand that, that a solid CRM system, first of all, will work well with their agency management system, as you talk about Hawksoft. Yeah. And also that it will present that information in a way, as you're talking about, it's ease of consumption on the part of the agency, right? Mm-hmm. And the part of the agent. Yep. So, and that is good stuff. So, and that's a really nice example, real world example of how your system kind of comes together to display that kind of relevant information.
Mm-hmm.
I am. I guess I want to follow up to see if you had any more relative to either the Net Promoter Score or the CRM, in terms of how it is, working for agents to make their processes, relative to sales and service, seamless and easy. Anything along those lines that you wanted to make sure we touch on?
Well, I think the one thing is just kind of an interesting discussion is I personally believe that we have to automate more. I think that we are sort of in this place where we think we need to see all of the things, like I need to see everything that's happening with one customer or another customer, but we're at this point where it's just practically impossible to be able to do that. So let's use a detractor, for example.
Right.
I think that when you get a low score in, it is important to get that notification in email, and we can send that out to you and say, hey, you have a detractor. But going a step further, we have an automation sort of engine in our product called Journeys. And there's other things there's other types of automations and things in other platforms. But I think it's important to say, okay, I'm going to recognize I have a detractor, and now I'm going to send out an automated email to the customer and say, hey, I just, got your response, and I wanted to let you know I'm reviewing it, and I'm going to follow up with you, right? So I can use my system to make instant contact with people, but then also supplement that with my own personal outreach and things like that. And so I think you have to find these opportunities where you can automate as much as you possibly can to make your job scalable and to be able to, communicate with more customers with fewer resources.
Gotcha.
So I think automation is key. We talk about CRMs and things like that, but how we automate and what we automate, I think we need to become more comfortable with that stuff. Like we have to kind of let the computer do more than what we're comfortable traditionally doing.
Right. So that's interesting that you should bring that up, because in other conversations you and I have had, I mean, I know that I would like to get to the issue of artificial intelligence, right? Mm-hmm. So, and in this day and age, it seems to me that artificial intelligence either is or is soon to be part of any quality CRM, right? Yeah, and so my question to you would be: do you perceive it the same as I do? And if so, has ClientCircle already taken steps along those lines in terms of integrating AI into their CRM, or is that something that's anticipated down the road?
Oh yeah, definitely. We've actually been using with ClientCircle. We've been Rocket Referrals, I should say, we have been using AI for about 10 years. And there's a few different, AIs out there. The two that I think are sort of important to talk about is there's the generative AI that everybody knows. It's ChatGPT and, all of these things that's creating content, whether it's, copy for ads or emails or, websites and things like that. Or images and video and things like that. It's using models to create content. And then there's also sort of your predictive, sort of more traditional AI that can look at a bunch of data and sort of predict what, it can answer questions, I guess you could say, and give you the most likely answer based upon prior results. And in a way, that's kind of what generative AI is, but done in a different way. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're going to see a combination of these two things working together. So for example, in a CRM, you need to be able to look at things like NPS. We've been talking about NPS results that can be fed to train models that might be able to even predict what someone's NPS score will be based upon other types of interactions that you've had with that customer. And so we could get to a point where we don't need to survey people because we have a high enough confidence to what they're going to say based upon the data that we have about them. And so if I already know what your NPS score is going to be, and I then can use that to send some communication to that person. But now here's where we start to combine it with generative AI. You might even have the AI write that email for you based upon that customer's content and products and services. So I think that we're not too far off from these things.
Right. So, and that's really, it's relevant and it's important. It has bearing. And my concern as you were describing AI and how it might be utilized going forward in lieu of surveys at times, I thought to myself, well, it's kind of the danger side of that is it's kind of like if we were to take two sporting teams and say, okay, well, based on statistics, Team A is going to win this series, so let's not even play it, right? But we know upsets happen, right? So I guess I could go for what you're discussing, what you're outlining here, but my thought would be, okay, but every 6 months we're going to test that with the real deal, right? That kind of
100%.
thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we call reinforcement learning, right? So we have to be able to go through the real exercise and be able to use that to further train the algorithm. Otherwise, the AI can just kind of run off and then it has, its own bias that it continues. So for example, here's a really important thing to understand. When you are training an AI, you don't want to use data that was created from that AI or another AI unless it's done in sort of a reinforcement way. And that's because it can go off the rails. It can start to hallucinate, as they call it, and it can create biases that you don't want in there. So having some human input and interaction and guidance and movement is really important.
Gotcha. And I would agree with that 100%. And it's funny, my last sports analogy, of course, we all not too long ago became aware of the Tom Brady roast, and my thought process as you were describing, it's like, well, an AI model probably would have said a quarterback drawn at the 199th position, and at the end of the 6th round, in the NFL will never get a Super Bowl ring, but he got 7 of them. So
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So and so I guess that's just one of those things that, and we've all talked about this, right? Is that AI has a huge role. I mean, even to hear how evenly you describe generative AI as, in Chat GPT, and it's going to create, it'll create a blog for you. It'll create some kind of content for you, including videos. And I don't know that, a year ago, that folks were, when they talked about Chat GPT, they were talking about, it'll write a blog for you or it'll write this for you. But the truth of the matter is that it's already evolved to the point where I could use some kind of generative AI to create a video to go with my communication that is going through my CRM, right? I mean, it's all sort of just placed together.
Right. It's all built on top of each other. And, just a few days ago, OpenAI released their newest model, 4.0, and it's mind-blowing. It's kind of more multimodal. So you can input text, video, voice, and it's going to be able to interpret all 3 of those things at the same time to give you an answer. And I think that we're going to continue to be able to build on top of these type of evolutions that make everybody's products better.
Right. Right. And I think that what we need to clarify, and you did earlier, and I just want to say it one more time, that the thing that insurance agents, producers, all of those folks working in the insurance agencies need to understand is that you don't have to know how to code this stuff. You don't have to know, right? You need to adopt it as a user and know that it's in your systems, but you don't have to be the expert relative to how it works.
Yep. It's just a tool. It's like any other, well, I don't want to say it's like any other tool. Any tool is not like any other tool, but right. It's an additional tool, that we should be using to make our jobs more efficient, to make the results that we give our customers better. If I said, hey, I have this amazing tool that would allow you to serve 50% more customers and be more accurate, would you say yes? And I think we can get to that level. Of course, if we don't give it a chance, then we never will. But I do think that if we can get there, if we continue to improve it and really work to and believe that it can be beneficial for us.
Right. Right. Agreed. So this is excellent. And I cannot believe we've already reached 30 minutes, to be truthful with you. Because as you know, there were several more topics I wanted to get to, but we're not going to get to those today. I'm hoping that maybe I can hook you into coming back and being a guest again, and we can get into some of the other areas that we were going to touch on today, including I really it's time to talk about refreshing the whole approach to websites, I think, at this point in time as well. Then I wanted to get into some of the things that ClientCircle, because you do offer websites, correct?
Yes, we do.
The latest and greatest there. I would have loved to have gotten into that, but we've just simply run out of time. So what I did think I would do at this point, if you're okay, is invite you to tell us a little bit more about ClientCircle in particular. What makes it stand out from the pack when it comes to CRM? Because we know that there are a number of those out there, systems out there, or other companies that are offering CRM systems today. And I just thought that maybe I'd give you a moment to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think the key thing for us is that when you are a customer of ClientCircle, we want to listen to what your business problems are the big objectives that you have, and then we'll present sort of a solution on how we think you can best achieve those things using our platform and other platforms combined. And that's maybe a difference between us and others out there, that we are here to help your business improve, and we want to be able to set you up for success. And, that could mean, for example, we might say, hey, you're not sort of, I don't want to say ready, but maybe automations and things are not sort of the thing you need to focus on right now, because we did a short survey and we found that you have a large group of customers that are unhappy about one other thing. We can help solve that problem and then focus. And as long as, you're ready to kind of have that strategic discussion and have a partner that's really going to work on those things with you, then we're a really, really good fit for companies like that. Excellent. So, and I don't normally do this, but I have to say that I do keep abreast of what's going on out there in the market, and your pricing seems incredibly fair. And I don't know if that's just a unique situation for SIAA member agencies or if that's in general. But I had to mention it because I do, as I said, stay abreast of what's going on out there in the industry, and your pricing model seems incredibly fair. So, well, thank you. I think that one of the things about our business is my brother Carl and I, our dad has this small garden and seed store that he's had for 40 years. And I think it drove us crazy that he couldn't get access to the enterprise level software and inventory systems and things that he needed to run his business. And so we said, hey, how do we build a platform that's enterprise level and affordable for small, medium-sized business? And, it's just kind of core to who we are. It's one of the core beliefs that we have as a company.
Oh, that's excellent. And it's nice to hear the story behind the story, to be honest with you. Okay. So our guest today has been Torey Maerz, and he is the co-founder and CEO of ClientCircle by Rocket Referrals, and we now understand the relationship there. Torey, thanks for joining me today. You're always informative and engaging participant in these conversations, and I do appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you very much. It was great to be here.
Great. So for our listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in today to listen to Insurance Agents Talk Shop. I'm Doug Coombs, Chief Marketing Officer at SIAA. And to learn more about the Agent Alliance, please visit SIAA.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please do subscribe. Be well, everyone.